In the year 3025, humanity no longer lives on a single world. Energy comes from the sun, minerals come from asteroids, and millions of people are born in cities suspended above Earth. For centuries, this seemed like the greatest triumph of the human race, until distance began to change everything. Welcome to the year 3025. Human expansion did not begin with an evacuation. It began with an opportunity. In the middle of the third millennium, orbit offered abundant energy, direct access to asteroids, and space to build on a scale impossible on Earth. First, the industries moved up. Next came the shipyards, laboratories, and processing plants. Earth remained the cultural and political center of humanity. But work, wealth, and innovation began to shift toward the heavens. To organize this expansion, the Orbital Development Authority was created, an institution formed by governments, energy companies, and scientific consortia. The first workers signed 5-year contracts. They received high salaries, housing, and the promise of returning to Earth with enough money to start a new life. Millions accepted. The first stations were small, but each asteroid provided more iron, nickel, and water. The modules grew, connected to one another, and formed the orbital highway, a network of factories, ports, and cities encircling the planet. What had begun as a workplace began to become a place to live. Contracts were extended. Families moved up. And the first children were born who knew no other world than the corridors of a station. Their parents still dreamed of returning, but each generation found it harder to do so. Bodies adapted to reduced gravity needed months of rehabilitation to withstand life on the surface. Earth residency permits became more restrictive, and the best jobs were no longer down below. They were in orbit. Moreover, losing a contract could mean losing one's home, oxygen, and the right to remain in the habitat. Then the first protests began. They weren't asking to return to Earth. They were asking to stop being governed from Earth. Humanity had ventured into space in search of prosperity. Without realizing it, it was building a civilization that no longer needed to return. As generations passed, the orbital highway ceased to be merely infrastructure. It became a world, a vast ring of stations, factories, shipyards, and cities suspended around Earth. Asteroid mining was coordinated from there. Autonomous tugboats captured enormous masses of rock in the outer solar system. and hauled them to refining complexes, where they were crushed to extract iron, nickel, water, and exotic minerals. Energy came from the solar swarms. Thousands of photovoltaic sails orbited near the sun and transmitted their output to the highway via microwave and laser beams. Whoever controlled that network controlled nearly the entire economy of the solar system. The former Orbital Development Authority eventually evolved into the Orbital Alliance. It was no longer an institution run from Earth. It was a technocracy in its own right, governed by engineers, resource managers, and life support specialists. In orbit, politics was not organized around territories. It was organized around systems, energy, gravity, oxygen, water. Every decision had to ensure that millions of people would still be breathing the next day. But orbital prosperity was not distributed equally. The inner rings, closer to Earth, were home to the centers of government, the universities, and the large hydroponic gardens. There, gravity was stable, spaces were spacious, and the windows offered a constant view of the planet. In the outer rings, life was different. The stations were older. The radiation shielding had undergone decades of repairs. Gravity would fail for hours, and families lived near factories that never stopped vibrating. Inequality was no longer measured by neighborhoods. It was measured by the orbit in which you were born. In the central sectors, traveling to Earth was still possible. In the outer sectors, many people could not even afford the medical treatment necessary to withstand Earth's gravity. There, the children of the void grew up. 4 generations born amid steel bulkheads, air filters, and titanium corridors. People who had never felt rain, wind, or earth beneath their feet. For them, Earth wasn't exactly home. It was the world that appeared on the other side of the hatches. Beautiful, close, and increasingly alien. Orbit had begun as an extension of Earth's civilization. Now it was beginning to wonder why it should continue to obey it. Distance didn't just change the way people lived. It changed the species itself. For centuries, humanity remained scattered across Earth, orbit, and the most distant settlements in the solar system. Each environment demanded a different way of surviving. And as generations passed, those differences ceased to be temporary. Thus were born the 3 humanities. The first were the organics. They remained on Earth and defended the integrity of the body against new technologies. They accepted cellular therapies, genetic repair, and treatments capable of prolonging life for nearly 2 centuries. But they had drawn a line. The body could be repaired. The mind must not be connected to any network. For them, freedom meant preserving an inner space that no one else could enter. Their government, the Assembly of Integrity, banned interfaces capable of directly recording or altering thoughts. Officially, it was protecting human autonomy. But many young people believed it had begun to decide who had the right to change. Some traveled clandestinely to orbit to connect for a few hours. When they returned, their families looked at them as if they had surrendered the only part of themselves that was still truly private. The second humanity was born in orbit. The Void people had been living for generations in habitats where a failure in pressure, power, or gravity could kill thousands of people. Their bodies became taller and more slender. Their bones and organs were reinforced to withstand radiation and changes in gravity. But their most profound transformation took place in the mind. From childhood, they remained connected to the habitat's artificial intelligence. The network monitored their stress levels, anticipated emergencies, and coordinated collective responses. At first, it was a safety measure. Later, it became a way of life. The Void people shared images, emotions, and brief thoughts without needing to speak. Verbal language didn't disappear. It became more intimate. Words were reserved for secrets, familiar whispers, and everything that no one wanted to have on record. Speaking in a low voice meant that the network wasn't listening entirely.
We only have a few minutes.
Their relationships also changed. Couples could share memories and emotional states. Many children grew up in extended families made up of several connected adults. That reduced loneliness. But it also made it harder to hide. For someone born in the void, mental silence wasn't freedom. It was abandonment. The Orbital Alliance defended that connection as a collective necessity. But the disconnected demanded the right to shut down their interfaces for a few hours and remain alone within their own minds. For them, it was privacy. For the Alliance, it was a risk to the entire habitat. The third humanity was born within the networks that kept the other two alive. Managing the orbital highway, the solar swarms, and the mining routes required a speed of computation impossible for a human brain. The first engineers began connecting directly to the systems. For hours, they could control thousands of processes at once. But returning to their bodies afterward began to feel like confinement. The flesh was slow. It needed sleep. It felt pain. And he grew older while the network continued to operate. That was when the Transcendence Project was born. At first, it was used to save terminally ill patients, workers damaged by radiation, and engineers who could no longer disconnect. Later, it ceased to be a treatment. It became an alternative to biological life. Thus, the post-biologicals were born. Their consciousnesses resided in massive servers located beyond Mars. They could live within simulations, use mechanical bodies, and experience years in just a few hours. They could also create copies of themselves. Some were later reintegrated into the original consciousness. Others refused to disappear. They had lived their own experiences and no longer considered themselves a mere extension. Their government, the Continuity Directorate, had to answer an impossible question. If a mind was copied 10 times, did it have the right to 10 votes? Was each copy a person, or just a temporary tool? For the biological branches, it was a philosophical dilemma. For the post-biologicals, it was a struggle for the right to exist. None of the three humanities considered itself a deviation. The organics believed they were protecting the human essence. Those of the void thought that connection was the necessary price for surviving together. The post-biologicals saw the abandonment of the body as the next step in evolution. For a time, they managed to coexist, but relationships began to grow strained. Marriages between organics and inhabitants of the void rarely survived. For one, mental silence was the last refuge of intimacy. For the other, that same silence was a sign of distrust and abandonment. On a political level, the rift was just as deep. Earth refused to recognize many digital copies as legal persons, and the post-biologicals demanded a say in decisions regarding infrastructure that only their minds could manage. None of the three groups hated one another. The problem ran deeper. They had ceased to understand one another, but they still depended on one another. Earth retained control of biology and medicine. Orbit controlled energy and industry, and much of that infrastructure could only be managed by digital minds. The separation did not begin when they stopped trading. It began when words like freedom, family, or identity started to mean something different to each branch of humanity. The divide was not merely ideological. It soon became a physical reality. For centuries, the solar system had seemed infinite. But all infrastructure has its limits. The orbital population continued to grow. The outer colonies needed more energy, and millions of people were applying for access to the Transcendence Project. For a time, the solar swarms managed to sustain it all. Then they were no longer enough. Expansions of new habitats were suspended. Waiting lists for transcendence began to stretch for decades, and some colonies were ordered to halt their growth. The system was not collapsing. It had reached its limit. It was neither a cataclysm nor an external threat. It was the weight of its own success. To allocate the available energy, the three branches convened the Helios Conference. The network could preserve the biospheres and expand the biological settlements. It could build new orbital cities. Or it could increase the capacity of the digital servers. But it could no longer do all three things at the same time. The organics advocated for medicine, closed ecosystems, and the expansion of biological life. The vacuum humans demanded new cities and the renewal of an increasingly overburdened infrastructure. The post-biologicals wanted to expand digital capacity and prepare for their expansion beyond the solar system. None were willing to back down. The Helios Conference ended without an agreement. For the first time, each branch began stockpiling energy, materials, and technology to secure its own future. It wasn't a war yet, but the solar system had ceased to function as a single civilization. For centuries, they had debated what it meant to be alive. Now they had to decide which of those forms of life had the right to continue growing. Staying together would force two of the three humanities to give up their own future. Fear finally shattered what diplomacy had managed to preserve. The Orbital Alliance diverted energy to its defenses. The Continuity Directorate withdrew from the shared networks. Earth closed its access points and reactivated weapons that had been deactivated for centuries. The three human civilizations stood face to face. For hours, the fleets waited for an order. A single signal would have been enough, a single shot, a power cut over control of resources. But the order never came. Everyone understood the same thing. Winning that war over resources meant wiping out two legitimate forms of humanity so that a third could continue. The Helios Conference met for the last time, not to unite them, to divide the remaining energy in the system and accept the separation. The organics would retain Earth and its biospheres. The vacuum humans would use their share of the resources to transform their cities into immense migratory worlds. The post-biologicals would send probes to other stars and transmit their consciousnesses when the new hosts were ready. The separation lasted for generations. From the surface, the organics watched as the lights of the other humanities faded into the vastness. They did not feel as though they had lost, nor were they celebrating a victory. For centuries, they had been taught that humanity's greatest achievement was to remain united. But the universe had just shown them something deeper. For life to endure, it must learn to be diverse. True freedom did not lie in sharing the same world. It lay in ceasing to demand that the other be a reflection of oneself. Flesh would preserve the origin. Steel would carry human life through the void, and thought would travel beyond any physical boundary. That day, the solar system fell silent, but it was not the silence of an ending. It was the immense calm that precedes a new beginning. Humanity had not disappeared. For the first time, it had accepted that it could have more than one destiny.